So I'm going to talk about my Claude hackathon project. So the human slop that I'm cleaning up is my own. I'm not calling out any names. And the technical debt is also my own. So I decided you're not supposed to bring your own project that's pre-made to these hackathons, but I figured I might as well do some work that I needed to get done anyway. So I'm going to first give you some project background. So what I've done manually over the last year and what the project is about. So the first thing is, as part of the process automation effort to maintain our website after they took Drupal away, I created this gdoc to site script to convert our old CS department content into a Google Doc. And then we manage the site with the Google Doc and we export that into web pages. So that's the first thing. That was in the fall. And then when we export the web pages, there's a landing page. So when you go to this website, that's manually crafted by me, and it shows because the UI is kind of like terrible. It looks like an academic has created a web page still. And I do this by hand, HTML. And then this is Andrew. Andrew saw the Drupal replacement coming, and he has a Google Doc that's basically the entire graduate handbook. Anything related to the graduate program is in this Google Doc. And then he uses a Chrome extension to export the Google Doc into headings, into a single HTML page with a table of contents. And he does this manually. And then this site precedes all of this. So I had this CS department chatbot, and I had pointed it to the old Drupal. And so you can go see it there at askcs.org and ctf.org. And this was initially written as a retrieval augmented generation application with the initial Gemini model. So this is like really old. This is at least 3 years old, or 2 years old. Yeah, 2 years old. And it was pointed at the Drupal site. So this is where the technical debt comes in. I built this targeting Gemini 1.0, and that'll become germane later. And it basically scrapes the Drupal site and allows you to do Q&A against the Drupal site. Oh no, so that's something else. So that is student capstone technical debt that we have. And if I ever wanted to update that the AI fish, I would definitely do this. I would definitely have Claude do it because I don't want to do it. That's a bunch of code that I don't even understand, but that Claude would be able to understand very quickly and fix. So that's a job I don't want to do anymore. And that's like maintenance is the worst job of software engineering, because especially if it's not your code base. Actually, even if it is your code base, it's sometimes awful to have to keep the thing up to date. And so this was transitioned last fall because they took our Drupal site away. This was transitioned to point to the web.cs.pdx.edu landing page. So we have all these pieces that have gotten developed independently and over time. And it's a pretty clunky solution. So it's got a bunch of human slop, which is mostly mine. It's got a bunch of technical debt because thanks AI, anytime you build something within a month, it's basically old. So you have to maintain it. And then I am not an expert in AI, in HCI, or software engineering. I'm not an expert in any of that. And I'm now likely not even as good as AI anymore in those three things. So that's basically my take home after doing this. So this is the first one. So I'm going to just go through the pieces very quickly. This is our gdoc to site. It takes a Google Doc. So before they took away our site, I scraped it. And then I created this Google Doc that had the original content. And the content, every sort of web page is a tab here in this Google Doc. And then this script does a Google auth to authenticate to Google so I can access the document. And then it checks to see if the document has changed, because I don't want to update the site if the doc hasn't changed since the last time I did this export. And then it exports every single tab into raw HTML. And then I have to clean and fix the HTML, because when Google does the export, it does some crazy things that break when we try and put it on our website. And then I republish using a CS department Jinja template. So it's a website template. So it has all the look and feel of the PSU CS department website there. I asked Katerina if she wanted to take a hack at making that pretty, but now I might actually ask Claude Code. I only had 17 prompts. If I kept going, I probably would have restyled this Jinja template, but I didn't. I stopped. Okay, so this is what Andrew has developed with Ella. It's a graduate handbook with a single monolithic Google Doc. So it's done differently. The different subpages are heading ones on this handbook. And there's basically like 16 different sections. And I don't know if you've seen the handbook from the webpage, you'll see 16. There's a table of contents, there's 16 major sections. Those are all separated by H1s on the Google Doc. And then he has this Google Chrome extension that exports it into HTML. And then he has another script that runs to get the table of contents. And then that exports the final HTML. And then he adopts my Jinja styling sheet to basically get the same product that I produce. Okay, so he produces a single HTML page in the same style. And then this HTML gets dropped into that website repository directly. So it's not generated the way the other pages are generated. Okay, and then this is my handcrafted landing page. I dump links into categories and I'm manually curating this. And it's definitely not accessible in terms of like ADA. So I have a person in my class this quarter who's done ADA his entire career. And he has a script that looks for all caps and flags it. So he flagged my site because it's all caps. It's like, you don't do that for accessibility. Who knew? I didn't know. This is why I asked Claude to do the accessibility after the fact. And so, yeah, Claude would have a field day with that. That would not pass tests. And then you'll see the handbook here is a single link that I manually add. Yeah.
Curate. That's just taking that and
yeah, I have a. Yeah, I have a, and yeah, the organization is such that I'm trying to balance the UI so there's similar numbers of links under each category. It's really cheesy, actually. I'm not happy with it. This is why it's human slop. And you'll see what AI does to this pretty good. Okay, so then this is the chatbot that precedes all of it. So the idea is you scrape all the information on a website, and it used to be our Drupal site and the bulletin, and then you have a backend that the chatbot can sort of use that data to implement retrieval augmented generation, where it's answering questions based on the data that it has imported from the website. So that's PDX CS app. Yeah, so I could add that in the Google. So in the Google Doc, if you want to discover CS, if that heading is supposed to be linked to your website, yeah, you would add that link to the Google Doc, and then it would respect that. So yeah, you could do that. I could give you a. Oh yeah, that's in the Google Doc that got scraped. So it's scraped from the Drupal from last year before they removed it. So that's basically a year old, but you can go into the Google Doc and update the content there. Yeah.
So I could do that.
You could do that. I could give you access to the Google Doc. Yeah, this is, yeah, this right here. Yeah, this Google Doc, yeah, this is right. Yeah, basically. But like if you create a new tab, I have to update this. I have to update this to point to it. It'll create the path, but then to link it from the landing page, this is manually crafted. So I wanted to get rid of that. I'm like, yeah, that kind of sucks. Like you have to do. Yeah. All right. So this is just a brief rundown as to how the CS chatbot works. And again, this is several years old. It scrapes the website. And then, so that's basically what async HTML loader does. This is LangChain. It's basically scraping all the HTML, and then it's parsing the HTML with beautiful soup. And then it is chunking the content into separate chunks. So these chunks are such that like the chunk can fit into the model's context window. And initially, Gemini 1 had a context window of like 2 kilobytes or something, like 2 to 4 kilobytes. And so you have to chunk this up into small chunks. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to use this, send these chunks in as context to the model without it choking. So that's basically the next step. And then this does a vector embedding. So this is a semantic search where you want to get all the related documents near each other in vector space. So that's what this vector embedding does. And then as part of the vector embedding, I also asked to keep a build index. So when you do retrieval augmented generation, it's nice to have the actual link to the content that you are answering the user's query from, because you don't want it to hallucinate. And so the way you ensure that it doesn't hallucinate is when you chunk up the content, every chunk has the URL that it came from, so that when it gets stored in the vector store and then the chatbot accesses it, it has the content and the URL from where it got the content. So that's what the build index is doing. And then the vector database that I use is Chroma. So the idea of a vector database is that I have all my data and the vectors that it represents. And if I have a new vector, like from the question, I can get a similarity search. And that's how I get back the content that's relevant to the query. Okay, so then the UI comes in. This is LangChain and Chainlit, so similar to Steam lit that you're using, Mike. So this is what happens. You enter in a query, tell me about the department, and then it does the embedding, the same embedding that is done on the chunks, and then it does a semantic search to say, well, which chunk is most related to the question. And then it pulls that out of the vector database along with the URL for that chunk, retrieves it, the top K, and turns out on mine it's the top one. I only do the first one, so you could change that. And then you have the LLM take the context, take the original question, you send it to the model to generate the answer, and it gives you the result. So that was the original chatbot. So those are all the pieces. Now we get to the Claude hackathon. So the first thing is I know about planning mode. So I went to that Ralph Wiggum workshop and he was like, yeah, that's planning mode. And I hadn't talked to Yao yet. So he came in just in time. I was like, yeah, I'm going to just use the default planning mode. I don't know any better. And it's pretty good, actually, because I think their planning mode does do a grill me style thing, but it's always giving you options to just build. Like, I think grill me will refuse to build for you unless you actually clarify things. But I'm like, no, I need to, it's 3 hours. You have 3 hours to get this all done. So I'm like, yeah, I need an implementation fast. So we'll see that. So it's like the first thing is just nondescript. I was like, help me. I need planning mode to build an app. And it gives me all the different things it needs. So again, we could teach this to our students. It's like just planning mode could be a whole week of, you're collecting all your requirements. You're thinking about all of these things that go into the design of a software system. So if we do 301, this would be the first step. We could probably spend a couple weeks on this because it's like the most important step. Actually, maybe 3 or 4 weeks will be all on planning mode. Different kinds of planning modes. So we could evaluate planning modes. We could do grill me with docs. We could do this planning mode. So yeah, it's like, what is your idea? Like, this is because I gave it very little. So it needs all of this. So then this took 10 seconds to do. So this is what I tell it. This is the specification. I have an app, takes a Google Doc, exports each tab as a web page. That was the first thing. I have a separate app that takes a Google Doc with multiple heading 1 elements, where I'd also like to have each element be a separate web page. So this is Andrew's Chrome extension. I have no access to this Chrome extension. I didn't even ask Andrew what it was. So I can't provide it any code. I just can describe what the functionality is. It turns out the Claude is going to access this source code, but it's going to implement something sort of more or less blindly based on my description here. And you'll see that when it tries to implement this, it realizes that this description isn't enough, but it figures it out. and then it builds the thing that actually works, and I didn't have to do any of it. I didn't do any of the thinking. And then this is the handcrafted landing page where I manually categorize these links. It's a crude collection. So I have these about undergraduate, graduate student resources. You can see the other ones. There's like 6 of them there. And so I don't want to do that either. And then I have another app, and this describes the chatbot. Implements a chat interface on the website. It scrapes the site, puts it in a vector database, runs chainlet to take user questions, does a RAG query whenever a user sends something in, pulls the relevant content from the vector database, and sends it to an LLM to generate a result. So basically, in description, in natural language, I tell it what that thing is doing. And then I would much rather this be done all together. I was like, I don't want 4 different things. I definitely don't want to do anything manually. So help me. Okay, great context. So this is incredible. Like when I got this back, I was like, oh, I'm in for a ride. It says, oh, this is an interesting consolidation problem. Just from my text, it tells me you have conceptually one system, you have content sources, which are the Google Docs, page generation, and then you have a navigation and landing page that has a conversational chat interface. That's what you want. So good, you understand me, Claude. And then it gives me this table. And I'm like, yeah, you have gdoc to site, and you have this heading 1 splitter, which is Andrew's thing. This logic is duplicated. You could consolidate those and then implement a splitter, and then you have a heading 1 splitter and you have a tab splitter. So it's like 1 splitter, like 1 generic splitter, and then 2 specialized splitters. And you'll see that it's in a YAML file that you configure, so that if I had multiple other kinds of Google Docs, it could integrate with it. And then this, handcrafted HTML, organized links, and then it says, well, the problem with that is it's manual and it drifts from reality, because when you add a tab, I have to go and update this thing. I don't want to have to update this thing. I want you to just add the tab and then it show up, is the idea on this one. So, and I'm getting like Ella or Barbara have updates, and then it comes through me as a manual process, and then this would take care of that, hopefully. And then here's the other one, the chat bot scrapes the site, does a RAG chat, and it immediately says, oh, this is a problem. You have a lossy round trip. You're starting with ground truth, which is in the doc. You're converting it to HTML, then you're scraping the HTML, and then you're putting it into vectors. It's like stuff's going to get lost in this process, and that's probably not good. So the core insight is you're doing this. You could go straight from the docs and then export HTML vectors and navigation directly in 1 step, rather than doing all this multiple stuff. 1 pipeline, eliminate the scrape entirely, and potentially the RAG database. We'll see that it gets rid of the RAG database too at the end of this. Okay, so, and then it gives me this picture. Yeah.
Is this partially your nudge about, like, I'd like to do this all together in one thing?
Yeah. I don't want all of these things. I just want one.
So was the bottom of the next slide driven by that?
Probably. Yeah. It probably understood my goals. And then it understood, oh yeah, there is some stuff here that if it was done all in one, you could skip and you could potentially replace some things in this back end. Okay, so then this is great. This is a great ASCII picture. It's like, this is your unified architecture. Google Docs, this is your source of truth, which is the tab doc, Andrew's H1 split doc, and then your landing page that you handcrafted. And we'll see that this architecture is not quite what I ended up communicating with Claude. I modified this a little bit, but it's like, okay, ingestion pipeline, fetch via Google Docs, normalize into document sections. So you basically take all this stuff and then you normalize it into separate section artifact or data structures. And then you emit a structured, unified, intermediate representation. Turns out it chooses JSON. It says you could either do this in Markdown or JSON. It chose JSON. Almost everybody is doing Markdown, but whatever. I'm not going to quibble. I don't care. Just as long as it works, I don't care that much. So you'll see on the back end, after the build, you'll see this big old JSON file that's got all the content from all of the Google Docs in there. And that's what it uses as the basis for all of it, for the website, the chat, everything. And that's basically what this is. And then from this unified knowledge base, you emit the website. You emit vector database embeddings per chunk if you still need it. Turns out you don't need it. And then the landing page. And you can do this automatically via metadata, or you could have an LLM do it. And that's what it'll ask me. Do you want to do this manually, or do you want me to do it? So that's what's interesting later on. And then you have a web app. That's one app that does all of it. Serves the pages, the landing page organization, and then it does the chat all in one. That's basically what you want, all in one UI. So that's the next one. That's a presentation later.
Does the same issue have like images embedded in your?
Oh yeah, it asks me what to do with images. Like I skip it. I was like, yeah, I don't. There aren't any images in the Google Doc. So getting the images to come through from the Google Doc into the website, I skipped because it's mostly information. So yeah, we could do that. Yeah, yeah,
Could just
yeah. If there were embedded images that when it emit, yeah, you could do that as an add-on. You could do that. If I had more Claude credits and time, I would probably add support images, and it would. Here is, so then this is planning mode still. It's like, we got to keep going. I got to know more about this. So how many source documents do you have? How often do they change? This drives the trigger for updating. Okay. Is the categorization something you want stored in the docs, hand curated, or in a separate configuration, or do you want the LLM to infer it and then do the categorization for you, the categorization of the links? It turns out I ended up doing the last one. I'm like, yeah, have the LLM do it. I don't need to look at it. Do you want the chat to cite pages? So this was really important to me, right? Like, you have to make sure you're not hallucinating. You have to send people to the ground truth. So that's another question. How do you want to deploy this thing? So PSUIT, preferred hosting, auth requirements, how do you want to do it? What vector database? Because I didn't specify that we were using Chroma. It's like, what vector database do you use today? So I want to confirm. So it didn't retrieve any of the code yet. It will later, but if it could have answered its own question if it actually retrieved the site. And then if you want, it gives me the option to just start going. So sketch out the section data model, do the unified CLI, or where would you like to start? And so, like, I could do continue planning mode, or I can actually have it start doing stuff. So this is where you tell a student, you should probably keep on planning mode. So Grill Me would be like, yeah, no, we're going to force you into planning mode because you're going to do this and it's going to come out crappy. And so Yao and I were talking about a lot of people end up with crappy things because they jumped into this a little bit too quickly. So I've read a couple things. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to clarify. I really want you to know. So here are the source documents. So this is the web.cs.pdx.edu one. So if you click on this, Stephanie, you just go right to the Google Doc. It's actually publicly readable. It's getting exported to the website. It's like publicly readable, but so I don't necessarily need to do the Google Docs API. If I could just scrape this. Oh, actually, I do if I want to do an export as HTML. Sorry. So yeah, and then the heading one. This is the graduate handbook. So I was like, these are the two source documents. The categorization is done manually, but I want you to infer it. I want you to call an LLM on every single subpage and then have the LLM generate the category. So that actually is, one LLM call per web page. So it's like ends up being 47 LLM calls. So it's like, are you sure you want me to do this? This is 47 calls. So at least it's exposing your token use. Like, it's asking you, and it actually defers this. It doesn't want to do this until you're absolutely sure you want to do the LLM calls. 47 is the number of pages. Every page has got 20, probably like 5,000 bytes to 20,000 bytes. And that's basically like at least 1,000 tokens per, 1,000 to 2,000. So that's expensive. And so Claude's like, yeah, I could. And this is, Claude is generating this stuff, but the actual code is using Gemini. So it's going to call Gemini to do the categorization. And I didn't realize this because I'm sitting next to you, Yao, and I'm like, hey, look, this is Claude patting itself on its back, saying good job. But no, it's actually saying good job to Gemini when Gemini does the categorization. So I went through this transcript, and the stuff I was telling you was going on, Yao, was completely wrong. This is why you have to walk through the transcript. You have to have students walk through the transcript. Most students don't look at the transcript. In fact, I wasn't looking at the transcript. But like you, I think we have to have students when they're using Claude Code, and this would be a good exercise to in the intro sequence. You have to have them analyze the transcript that these coding agents are doing in order to make sure at least they have a grasp of what is happening in the back end. So that's one of the things that I would say as a take home for this. Definitely go through the transcript because my mental model of what it did was completely inaccurate until I actually took the time to go through the transcript to try and show you what happened. And what I thought I was going to show you wasn't what happened. So now I'm showing you what happened. Oh yeah, it's in that GitHub repo. Actually, yeah, there is a link. The full transcript actually is you'll see it right. Yeah, so you can go here. Yeah. Yeah, I did an export. So in Claude Code, you do /export, and then I put this in the repo just for fun. And you can see I'm only giving you snippets, the interesting snippets out of the transcript. I've eliminated some of the other stuff, but I think at least initially you have to get an understanding of what it's doing. You might have to do this every year because the thing is changing so quickly. Like you kind of have, like for some things, I'm like, I don't need to see it, like the HTML UI stuff. I'm like, I'm just gonna trust. I wouldn't understand the transcript actually. And this is the problem with students: is how do students understand a transcript if they haven't been taught? Yeah, so this is where it's important. You teach the background and enough of the foundation so that they can understand the transcript, but you don't necessarily have to have them grind away at building the same thing that Claude is building. You let Claude do it, and then you have students analyze the result just to see what is happening on the back end. Yeah.
If you're familiar with the code base, I sometimes find people have videos. I can find where Cloud code doing like the bouncing or going around circles that I can write my prompt. To ask it how to do that. By the way. Yeah.
Okay. So then I want you to do this automatically, and then I would be hosting this either on my own web server or a Docker file I can deploy to Cloud Run. I didn't actually get to this in the hackathon, so I skipped. I mean, it gave me a Docker file, but I didn't actually deploy it. And then this is where I tell it, oh, it's using Chroma. But this is crucial. It's like I've been reading a lot about Karpathy's knowledge wiki. I'm like, yeah, you could actually just build the knowledge wiki on the website and then have the chat interface use the knowledge wiki, which is like it's like a Wikipedia. It's got these cross links in there. So I was like, yeah, that would be cool. But it didn't actually know about the knowledge wiki. It didn't, like, it skipped that. So, and then you could also get rid of this vector database because I kind of realized later on that I'm like, do I need Chroma? And then this is where it's like you can use the entirety of the two source documents if it fits into the context window now. So that's where the technical debt comes in. Okay, so this is the big step. So this is like a whole bunch of slides. Source grounded recommendations. So pull both repositories locally. So this is where it's basically accessing the Git repos, getting all the code. And it's like, oh yeah, it describes to me exactly what I've built. So this is entirely accurate. So it helps to know so that you can trust the LLM. If the LLM's giving you the correct answers on your own code base, then you're like, okay, you didn't hallucinate this. This is not, garbage in, garbage out. So this is basically, this is the actual variables that I'm using to do to check to see if the doc has changed. Change detection, so I can avoid exporting. And then this is basically how I implemented the chatbot. I used that embedding model. I used Chroma. I used Gemini 2.5 Flash because I had to update it. They deprecated 1.0. So I'm just sitting there. Anytime they've deprecated a model, I just go in there and change the model to the latest one. That's what I've been doing. I haven't touched the code at all, just changed the model. And then, crucially, LoadDB does a scrape, a parse, a chunk, and then it basically just reparses the HTML you just generated with the gdoc to site. Like, what are you doing? And then it chops it up into arbitrary 10K chunks that don't respect section boundaries. So like if your section is just slightly more than 10K, you're kind of hosed. Like, and then your context is split across 2 chunks. So it gave me a little bit of side criticism there. And then it's like, okay, this works building a Docker file every time, but like to deploy. But every time a doc is edited, you have to redo this whole thing. You have to have a whole CI/CD pipeline for every time this Google Doc has changed. You know, like, yeah, that's probably not good. So skip the vector. This is where now it's authoritative. It's like figured out what you have done. And at this point, it switches over to a more authoritative tone. So I was just sat in on Amita's class, yesterday? And she was like, do you trust something that is uncertain or it is really certain? And I told her it has to be uncertain at the beginning because it doesn't know your stuff. But then later on, if you can trust after it has interviewed you, if it is authoritative, then you trust it more. So it played the psychological game on me. It's like, I understand your stuff. Yeah, here's my authoritative recommendation. And I'm like, okay, I believe you. What am I? I'm just an amateur here. Okay. So, and then, but it just explains to you the trade-offs. So this is where it knows a broader view of things. So it identifies the technical debt of doing this chunking approach, because the chunking approach was when Gemini had a 2K to 4K context window size. And our tabs, our sub web pages are bigger than that. So then it's like, oh, you just kept updating the model based on Gemini 1.0's context window size. So what you could do is you could just send the entire to Google Docs on every query. This is higher latency and higher cost, but you have no bugs. You have the full, and Gemini is good at taking full context and zeroing in on the content that actually is necessary. And then crucially, so I ignored this. In fact, I didn't even know this was going on. It's like, hey, this is without caching though. So the one thing that happened with Gemini 2.5 is that the model now caches your context if you want it to. So what I could have done was just uploaded the 2 Google Docs into Gemini's model and have it cache it. And then basically all that context is free. It doesn't count on my tokens. So it is like without caching, it's higher latency and cost. But with caching, if you're enabling caching, then you get the best of both worlds. So it's telling me this. I was like, oh, I had no idea. I was talking to Amita, and she's like, oh, yeah, I knew that. I knew Gemini 2.5 had caching. I'm like, well, nobody told me. Well, maybe I didn't read it. And then this is the other thing it recommends. It's like section level retrieval. Now, every tab, as I looked at the doc, it's like every tab is going to fit into the context window. So you could just do a full section and make that the context. You don't have to chunk this thing up anymore. So get rid of the splitter is the idea. So this is cheap and fast, mild complexity, and the risk of missing some context if it turns out there's multiple tabs that have the right context. And then this is what it tells me my current thing is, which is true. The chunks are cutting across semantic boundaries, and the citation ends up being to whole pages anyway. Just send in the whole page is what it's recommending. Okay, so Gemini 2.5 flashes huge context window and the ability to do the caching of context, where the docs are cached once, and then every query reuses the same context up in the cloud. So you're not even uploading the content anymore. It's just sitting there cached on Google, and then you don't pay the token costs. So it's like, oh, sweet, that actually works out the best. So it's cheaper and better than your Chroma setup. So again, I would have never gotten around to figuring that out. This is something I had no idea. And then it tells me if you ever outgrow it. So this is where the architecting comes in. What happens if you have like 10 more Google Docs and you go way beyond this context window? Then it recommends just do this approach, the section level retrieval. So redo it. So that's an interesting piece of feedback. And then it proposes an initial organization. So this is where I was talking to Yao. It's like you can kind of see the organization of the code base and understand that, yes, this LLM is actually doing you a favor rather than making a mess of things. So I look at this and it's like, oh, section data class. This is where you ingest all the Google Docs and get that intermediate representation. I looked into that. That looks legit. It uses object-oriented Python, which I don't do personally, but it.
Does it actually use data class? Well, that's like a better way.
It does use data class.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's yeah.
So it's not really OOP like this.
It uses, yeah, but yeah, it uses, I see class and I'm like, oh, that's object. It's using a data class. And then it's like, well, this is how you do the ingestion. So eventually you have to put this in. So you ingest from here. So gdocs access, tab splitter, heading splitter, and that'll call models and emit the JSON file. So that looks good. This is the LLM category inference. So this has got the Gemini model, and you put every single tab, you run it through the categorize thing to figure out, well, which category to put it in. And then this is the UI, the rendering stuff. So when I go and ask to update the UI, this is basically the export into HTML with the Jinja. And then there's more stuff down here for the templates that it's using. That's also UI stuff. I didn't put it in there. So I was like, oh, that actually looks pretty good. And then it asks for more information. It continues planning mode. It's like, I need to know more. Do you want me to do this? Auth and Cloud Run. Do you want, how do you want to do categorization stability? So like the LLM might give you different results. Do you want to be able to pin certain, like, so it's trying to balance LLM generated stuff with human preference. So it's like, do you want me to implement something that allows you to override the categorization that the LLM produces? So that's basically what this is. And then prompt caching pricing. So I didn't know about prompt caching. And so it looks like, well, so it's you need a minimum of 100,000 tokens in order to allow Gemini to do the prompt caching, the context caching. And so it hasn't checked this yet. Turns out our Google Docs are below 100,000, so it has to abandon this eventually. But you see how much work it's doing for you, figuring all this stuff out, and then you're just like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Citations. So since you're going to cite these for the RAG chat, because you're going to cite by section URL, we need to store that. So there's this process that I use called slugifying. That's pretty common. So graduate-admission. So this is the slug. All of the URLs are slugified in the original. So then it implements a slugification in the app itself. The way I do the slugification is really janky, but it sees that I'm doing slugification. It's like, I'll do the slugify like you've done, is the last one. Okay, so then you want me to go ahead and write the actual code. So yeah, this isn't the big step. The big step is the next one. Or would you rather nail down the categorization prompt and all this other stuff? So this is my fourth prompt. YOLO. This is not my money. So I'm going to do it. I have a 3-hour time line to hit. So I said, sure. Okay, so then it creates all the directories in the files. And if you look at this, it's like, oh, it's doing a bunch of shell commands. And it's creating all of this thing. And it's actually creating it in this repo. I tell it that my session is here, but then I actually have it create a new directory. I'm going to get to it at the end. Yeah. I did not use my own personal money like Yao did. I think there should be an asterisk on your award. Yeah, he transitioned from the coupon they gave us over to his own stash. I'm like, I think that's against the rules, is it? Don't you have to do all of this stuff on their $50? It was $50, so I didn't spend $50 on this. So, well, I wasn't gonna say anything. I'm like, okay, it's your time to shine. And then it does the verification. It creates these things, and it's doing the testing. It's actually testing via static analysis all of these things to make sure that they are well formed. It's like, oh yeah, this is where this is part of what they call harness. The harness engineering aspect is like, oh yeah, as you build things, anytime you create Python code, you got to test it. you call the testing agent and you have the agent run the test to make sure it works. So that's basically what this is doing. For every single file it created, all 16 files parse cleanly. Now you have a repository, and then this is how you run it. It gives you the instructions to run it. It'll actually kick it off for you as well, automatically, so that you don't have to. I didn't actually run this stuff. I was just like, yeah, bring it up. When I was ready to look at it, I was like, you launch it. I don't want to launch it. It's like, this is what you're there for. Okay, so, and then it tells you, this is crucial, it tells you what it didn't do. And I ignored this. And so later on, when I saw it didn't do something, I was like mad at it. But it told me. So here's the thing that it told me. It's like, yeah, this chat citation, I didn't spend much time on it. And it's like, it's a minimal UI. It just shows text. You need to swap in a markdown renderer eventually if you want pretty links. So it told me it didn't do this. And it didn't do a bunch of other stuff because I said, just go for it. So this is, this is only 4 minutes. There's one that's 22 minutes that it took to do. This is the dry run takes 22 minutes. So now it can do the dry run against your real docs and then get the actual website. So I was like, dry run, please. So I YOLO'd it again. I was like, yeah, I'll just, maybe crash and burn if, quickly. So when you say dry run, it goes in there and it actually tries to execute Python in your environment. And as it turns out, it has a hard time. So it finds Python 3.12, but then it sees like, your pip doesn't work. And it's like, well, I'll fix that. I'm going to download and install pip for you. And then, so this is a problem. I see this go by, and I don't like seeing rm-rs go by. And so I see a bunch of these things go by, and I'm like, oh, this isn't good, because this is where if you prompt inject this thing, or command inject it, you got a problem if it deletes your files. So I was like, oh, this is not good, but I was committed. I was like, all right, I already started this thing, and this made me really uncomfortable, but whatever. It all worked out, I think. So then you see this thing, it's basically curling and installing this. So if someone put a backdoor in this, they got root on my machine. All this supply chain stuff is happening right now against these coding agents. That's what adversaries are targeting, because if you're just curl bashing everything, you're letting the agent curl bash everything, you're just totally exposed. So that's what this thing is doing. Yeah, it's curl bashing a pip installer. That's unfortunate. Okay. No. I was like, well, it does ask, do you want me to go through with it? And I'm like, well, yes or no? And like, no, and I have nothing else to do for the rest of the 3 hours. Yeah, I'm like, this is why I put YOLO in there. I'm like, okay. You could, but then that takes at least 30 minutes of your 3-hour hack effects.
This is partially that knowledge, right? Yeah. The student has no idea. They're just going to say, yeah, please run it, because I have no idea at all, right? Yeah. And so, like, I don't know, I felt it. Just do it. Go for it. And you're basically like, yeah, I'm like, like.
I talked to a student who said he did a hackathon, and he spent like the first third of it trying to install all the tools. So I didn't want to spend a third of my time installing tools. So I saw that, and I'm like, oh yeah. Well, I hit yes, because I'm like, I gotta get something going rather than sit around and wait. Because I see Yao making his game already, and I'm like, oh boy, I gotta get something running. So then this is really interesting. It runs the test. It's trying to do the whole thing. And in implementing all of this stuff, it comes into a dynamic runtime bug. So basically you have the content scrape that you have to build, and then you have a chat bot that uses that content to answer questions. It tries spinning up the chat bot first before the content has been scraped and the backend has been built, and it realizes this does not exist, and it figures it out. So yeah, it diagnoses the bug, and it says, this is where it's patting itself on the back. It's like it's being sycophantic to itself. It's like, good catch. the chat backend was eager. Let me make it lazy so that the server starts even if the build hasn't been generated yet. So it figured it out. Okay, so then it updates the application, which is the next one. And then it tested the Google. So it basically looked at the repo, and I had my Google auth stuff in that directory. So it just basically took those credits. It asked me, but then I said, yeah. So yeah, there are some interactive windows that I don't show here. I'm just showing you the actual prompts, but it is giving you some yes and no questions throughout. And so then it actually tests if that token in that file in the gdoc to site thing actually works. And then it does work. Okay, and then it recognizes I have this API key in my environment. So when it does the categorization, it knows it has the ability to invoke Gemini, is this one. Okay, so then let me run or confirm the auth before doing the full build, and that's what it does. And then it tries to do the full build, and it gets this error. You're like, yeah, there's another error. So it turns out it figured out that Google Docs are not uniform. So most new Google Docs, you create a new Google Doc, there's a revision ID in the heading. Before this latest iteration, that revision ID was stored somewhere else. And like, I'm not gonna diagnose this as a developer. I would never want to spend the time to figure out that this was the bug, but it figured it out. It's like the heading doc didn't return a revision ID. So let me make it more robust. So if it doesn't find it, it just makes it an empty string. So rather than crashing the code. So it caused the code to crash because it assumed it was there. Python, it just assumes. But if it comes back with none, it crashes because none is different than an empty string. So then this is where it's like, I'm going to make it an empty string. And you can see it in the transcript. Okay. So yeah, and then it finally says, I have 32 tabs in the main document, which is correct, 15 H1s in the handbook, 47 sections. So this is so it did the first step of building the backend. And then it also finds another problem. It examines the handbook, and I told it 15 H1s, and then the main page, 32 tabs. So as it turns out, the tab feature is new to Google Docs. And so it assumed the old Google Doc format where the page that doesn't have the tabs is just a monolithic Google Doc. It turns out now everything has a tab. And the default tab, there's an initial default tab now that has the main Google Doc. So it didn't know that. It implemented it thinking that it had the old Google Doc version. And then it comes through another error where it says the heading split code actually uses tabs at the top level too. That document uses a tab. So it has to update its code. This is done at runtime. And I didn't have to parse out and debug the format problem with Andrew's thing. So that Chrome extension has to be updated as well. So that's where the logic of that Chrome extension is coming in to actually handle that case. But it breaks whenever the Google Doc format changes. And it figured it out that the Google Doc format has changed because it has this H1s live inside of a tab case now. This is true for all Google Docs now. And initially it didn't have that programmed into it. So that was an interesting one. And then it does the actual splitting. So now that they fixed the logic, fixed the H1, the heading 1 logic, so then they'll do it in 2 phases, the heading splitter only, and then add the tab splitter. And this is where it runs all of it and says, oh, heading splitter works perfectly now. And then it also, this is the tabbed one. Down here, the tab splitter, both splitters work. And then it's going through there and it spots an issue. There is a collision, a slug collision between the 2 docs. Andrew has a heading in his Google Doc that's exactly the same as a tab in my Google Doc. And when this system tries to export the slug, they conflict. And it's like, it tells me that. And I was like, oh, that's definitely true. Because basically what I do, I think what I do on that one is I allow Well, I don't. So the handbook is a separate document. I don't actually have its subsections visible into the landing page, but I'm trying to make his subsections visible to the landing page, and that's where the slug collision happens. And so we have to get rid of this. It's duplicate content, and it comes up with an ingenious way of handling the duplicate content, which I would have never built myself, but I'm glad that it built later on. Okay, so let me fix that. So it basically adds a prefix to disambiguate the two sections. I think it like put grad hand in front of the graduate assistantships section. Okay. Okay, so then it attempts the full website build, retrieves the Google Docs, and then decides that 45,000 tokens is basically both of those two Google Docs combined. So it's under the 100K. So it can't do the full context caching, but it's like, it says, you know what, it's good enough for full context Gemini. So now it's sending up 45,000 tokens every query. I haven't figured out the cost of that. Hopefully our website isn't that popular. Otherwise my funding account will dry up pretty quick. And then it renders the sections in the landing page. So it's running these tests. It's actually downloading and accessing these things. It's accessing the HTML. And then if you add the playwright skill, it will actually bring up a web browser and navigate the pages as a testing piece of this. So then the pages render correctly with the original style and the landing page works. But because the model didn't do the categorization step, it didn't call that script, everything is in the more category on the landing page because there was no categorization. So then it fixes that. It says, okay, now I have to organize the links. So I'm going to run the categorization on Gemini. And then it's like, this is sensible. This is how I grouped it. So the about has 2, faculty section has 2, undergraduate 14, graduate 23. And then it says, this is where I thought it was patting itself on the back, but this is patting Gemini on the back, saying, you did a good job grouping these things. And then it transitions. So now that's the landing page taken care of. So it's going step by step through the entire system, building it, testing it, and before moving on to the next part. So now it's like, okay, now I need to do the chat backend, and this is the real test. So yeah, this is giving Gemini some validation. And then it transitions over to the chat interface. That's the front of this. Okay, so then it tests the chat backend and it finds a hallucination. So it generates 4 chat queries, tests them, and then sees if the links that are attached to the response of the chat are legitimate, are actually not hallucinated. And so how many credits are required for the MS and CS? And it says, oh, it's 45, I think. And it says, excellent results, well formatted, but question number 4, it hallucinated external pdx.edu URLs. So something on the regular pdx.edu website rather than the web, the internal one. So I wanted all the links, all the references to be internal links rather than external ones. So then it's like, let me strengthen my prompt. So that's the next thing. It's like, oh, I didn't give the LLM enough explicit instructions on the links that it chooses to render as the source list. Because you have to tell the LLM very specifically what you want out of it. And so it says the URL attribute of the section tag is the only valid source link for that section. And then this one, if it's not answerable from sections, do not include a sources list. So again, this is probably something you would prompt engineer as well to make sure that your queries are source grounded. Okay, and then it retests the chat backend, and then so you'll see these test queries on the web UI. It redoes that, and it's like, okay, all of these answers now correctly format local URLs. So this is where it's doing the testing and the validation for you. So it just did the debug, it did the test and validation, and then it moved on to the next thing. Yeah. Yeah, and you'll see on the landing page, there are these sort of like what do they call them? Pebbles that you just touch and they're pre-canned queries. Those are the ones that are basically the ones that it tests. So if you go to mashimaro.cs.pdx.eu:8080, you'll see the chat interface, and then there's bubbles underneath that you just click and it pre-cans a query. So those are I believe those are the queries that it's using in order to test itself. So this is where it's like, oh, I didn't have to even do a verification step. That saved me a lot of time. It got the quality without me being involved, but I have to be able to check that the answers are eventually okay, but I don't have to actually do the work myself. Okay, and then, so this is just the back end. Now this is doing the front end via the API. So it's just an implementation. And then it basically runs the server and then actually interfaces from the web front end. So this is just directly sort of running the Python backend. But now it's like, I got to see if the front end actually, the plumbing works. And that's what this is. So it started, this is a web server basically, this, where is it, the UV-corn. And it's listening on, this is what's running on 8080 on my machine. And it says, oh, everything works end to end through Fast API. Let me clean up and summarize. So this is pretty cool. It's like, I went through all of this and this all works. So that's just what I walked through. It's like step by step, you can see it just chunking away at this thing. This is the thing that took 22 minutes. So it's like what Yao said, it's like, yeah, you need a treadmill to do something while you're sitting there waiting for Claude. I mean, I saw stuff going by, but I was like, oh, like this thing isn't finishing anytime soon. I don't know when it's going to finish. It's like the halting problem. You hope it finishes, but you never really know how long it's going to take. But it did the whole thing, and it checked it all out. Okay, this is the report. So it looks at this, and it says, yeah, 180 kilobytes, 45,000 tokens. This fits into the 1 megabyte window with room to spare, but it's below the cache minimum, the explicit cache minimum. So you're gonna have to do implicit caching, which is, you'll see it's there as well. It notices that of the 22 minutes, it doesn't want to take responsibility for 7.5 of them because the Google Doc export API rate limits your export. So it's sitting there backing off. So 7.5 of those 22 minutes is because my export, that Google Doc that does the export is rate limited. So I'm like, okay. So then you took 15 minutes basically to do all of this, which would be still much faster than what I took. And then the final size of this thing. So this, yeah, I was talking about how small these things are. Like it's like LLMs have a problem with scalability. Yeah, this is a small app. So it's like 1.5 megabytes of code. So it's not enormous. But it's trivial to ship this in a Cloud Run image. So I was like, that's fine. Summary of bugs that it found and fixed has also been given. And this is where you're like, wow, that would have taken me a long time. And I would have just been not very happy doing this work. So this is all the plumbing work that it did. Okay. So then the next steps. So it's like review the landing page, decide on the collision policy, autofix is fine, or it's giving me a hint. Maybe I need a preferred source marker in the content.yaml. So it gave me a YAML file. YAML is a configuration file format to basically control some of the behaviors after deployment. Like if I want to tweak some of the categories and basically include or exclude certain things, it gives me a YAML file to edit, to do so. Getting rid of the token, the Google Auth token, and just doing a service account. So if I'm doing this in Cloud Run, there's a way of doing it in Google Cloud that's more secure. And that's basically with service accounts and then build secrets. And then it asked me, do you want me to do scheduled rebuilds? I'm like, oh, that sounds good. So then you don't have to ask someone to update the website. It'll just rebuild it when it needs to. And then this, which I didn't see initially, polish the chat UI. Current one is plain HTML and then markdown rendering. So I didn't see this. So when I first saw the chat interface, I'm like, oh my gosh, look at this. But it's telling me it didn't touch this, that it needs to do something here to make it better. So it's actually giving you the minimum viable product because it doesn't want to consume all your tokens, which is actually a good thing. You don't want, and this is where planning mode really is, like grill me is really powerful because it doesn't want to use your tokens unless you're sure that that work isn't going to get wasted. I would have gone back and iterated back and forth trying to fix the thing. And then it's now working with a code base that has been designed for one thing that I'm trying to shift to another thing. It would have been better had it known up front how I wanted the thing to work. And you see with the architecture, that directory tree, you have to know that that's the way you want the thing organized before you say, go build it, before doing the dry run. And so I had like 3 or 4 prompts. I probably could have done a couple more before doing the dry run, but it looked good enough for me. And yeah, so this is where 3 hours kind of hurts you because you're like, yeah, I want to see you do something quick. So this took 22 minutes, and then 7 minutes was the Google Doc export. Okay, so, wow, this is taking longer than I thought it would. Transition to production. I haven't seen a thing. Like, I want to see this thing. So I'm like, can you pop up the website? And this is like on a universal interface on port 8080, so I can get to it with Marshimaro. And it tries to run it. And that's basically what it's doing here, setting up a server, and then popping it up, removing this, similar to Streamlit, yeah. And then gives you the URL. And then this is what, so it's not what you see here, because when I went to this, it was a really janky, bare bones website because I hadn't done the front end stuff yet. Bug fixing. I was like, hey, I tested it, and the embedded links on the landing page went to the production site, web.cs.pdx.edu, so I couldn't actually preview anything, as it turns out. And so I was like, fix this. And so it made all these links relative. And it's like, you give a base URL where this is at, and then all the links on that page are just relative URLs. And so if I deploy this onto web.cs.pdx.edu, it'll still work, but then it also still works on this URL. So then I could access the embedded content. So this took 2 minutes for it to update so that all the links were relative. And then I was like, use your front-end skill. So I knew enough about skills to say, you've got a front-end skill. It's one of the top 10 skills that Claude has. That people use. I'm like, use your front end skill to make the landing page both responsive and styled. And so it's like, let me make the landing page actually look like a real university department site. And I'm like, yes, now I'm in business, because what we have there right now does not look like a real site. And it gives me what you see. The final UI is fairly close to what you see on the site. And I'm like, yeah, that actually looks legit. So this is some of the stuff it does. I'll skip that. And then it's responsive and functional. So this is where the UI expert, you don't have to be the UI expert to get the UI that is basically best practices into your site. This is where it's like, if you have an agent team where those skills of the agents are best in class for that job, then that's how you're building an agent team now. This is where all the junior devs are now like being removed, because I have that expert in that skill, and if it outperforms the junior dev, then do I hire the junior dev? So that's a problem. Okay, so stuff like answer has a spinner while waiting. All of the ask. So these are chips, those quick ask chips that are on the UI. That's what these things are. These chips. So I think these are the ones, some of the ones that it tests. Those are the four queries. You asked about those 4 queries. So it would just, you click on these and it basically goes into the chat interface. Okay, then there's duplicate content between the 2 Google Docs. Because the handbook was a separate page, the duplicates didn't get surfaced on the website because it was separate. But as soon as you make the graduate handbook headings have separate pages, it's like, what do you want to do with these things? So there's Doctor of Philosophy has multiple tabs, Graduate Assistances have multiple tabs. And so I tell it, I want you to favor the Graduate Handbook doc because of the 2, the Graduate Handbook doc is the ground truth. And then remove all the links on the landing page related to these categories where they overlap. And then remove anything that refers to deprecated courses. I have two pages where 410, 510s that haven't been offered in like a decade. Like, we don't need to put those on our page anymore. So I have that there. Uh, this is where it's really cool what Claude does. Lurking in the graduate handbook that I had no idea was in there because I haven't even looked at the original Google Doc. I was like, oh, I noticed there's some other things you might want to clean up here. There is this additional possible topics in parentheses Ella, which is a to-do note. And then this one, internal graduate committee tasks. This is a heading 1 in the graduate handbook that I had no idea. I just thought this Google Doc was clean. I hadn't looked at it. And so this is basically at the bottom of this handbook are heading 1s in purple. And the Chrome extension must export these, and then Andrew must manually get rid of them. And the LLM found this and was like, do you want to remove this too? Or do you want the Ella section to actually be surfaced? And I was like, okay, I don't want that to be there, but I didn't know. Like, if I would have just written my program blindly, I would have had an Ella page and then be like debugging it for an hour. So it's like, hey, we have built in the YAML file a landing exclude list. Here are my recommendations of slugs to add to this. And so that the Ella topic one, the internal graduate committee task one, all of these things got added to it. I didn't have to actually program it. So that's the next thing. And then when you do the chat interface, do you want to downweight the content that's in here? Because right now, those get exported into my knowledge base. And then if I ask a chat, I don't want it to ask to get content from these internal notes. That's a problem. So then it asks me, yeah, do you want to tweak it? Or do you want to add some tweaks to this as well? So accreditation is still listed under undergraduate. Do you want me to put it back into where it was? So it saw that accreditation was in the about or something because I had balanced it. But then it was like, are you sure you still want it there? Or do you want to leave it under undergraduate? Or just be able to pin sections to specific categories to override what Gemini has done. So then I tell it, yeah, go ahead, do the exclusion, and then put accreditation under about, which is what it was originally. And then this is the final landing page composition. It put accreditation under about, and then it excluded all of these slugs. And when you see the YAML, you'll see landing exclude, and it's got these things in it now. And then category overrides, it builds this logic. And in the YAML file, it says, okay, put about into accreditation into the about section. So it implements that. And then it asks me a couple more follow-ups. Support is alone. Do you want to recategorize it so that you don't have a more section? This is generic. And I'd have to ask Andrew, like introduction and new students. It's like, yeah, that might not be good on a landing page. What do you want to do about that? That's a value call. I don't know. I'll have to ask Andrew if he wants it there. And then chat downweighting. I have a standing offer still to bias the chat towards handbook content for the duplicate topics. Let me know if you want that. How do you want me to build that? Where the preference is for the handbook over the website doc. And so it turns out it does build this. Put support in the about, go ahead and exclude intro and new students since they're fluff, and then weight towards the handbook content. And it implements this whole priority system, which I'm going to skip. It labels everything in the grad handbook as primary and everything in the tab doc as secondary. And it will only include secondary content if no primary content exists. That's how it built its its priority system. On the back end. I looked at this and I'm like, okay, I'm fine with that. Okay, and then this is when I was like, I brought up the chat interface and I'm like, oh, horrors, it's like plain text. And so this is where it's like, oh, this is just a 30-line placeholder. I did that intentionally. And then it basically gives you a rendered chat interface. So with markdown rendering, basically, which it offered multiple times that I ignored. And then I got to it and I'm like, hey, you didn't build it. You didn't build what I wanted. And then, okay. So the next 4 or 5 prompts is all UI. I'm asking that to update the UI for my preference. So the first one is like, oh yeah, this logo is too small. The chat button looks kind of crazy. And it basically implements a structure vector graphics file to put in the UI. So it fabricates an SVG file to then use in the Ask CS. So that's what you see there in the UI. I'm like, oh wow, that's pretty good. It didn't. I don't think it downloaded. It actually created it from its neural model. So that took 2 minutes. Looks great. Top bar. So this is a UI fix. 2 minutes. Another UI fix. It's just Department of Computer Science was appearing multiple times. Actual links are far down the page. Remove some vertical white space, and then remove this text, programs, courses, and whatever. And then it removed it, and then I was like, no, actually put that back. I kind of liked it. So then it put it back, and it didn't get mad at me for undoing the work that it had just done. And then it finishes that. Now this is what really floored me. So 15 minutes before they say hands off the keyboard, I was like, I'm going to ask a question about, does this pass website web content accessibility guidelines? So I have this person who's done ADA his entire career. I also have the university saying they're going to invest a whole bunch of money making our sites compliant with ADA. And I'm like, well, the LLM should be able to do this, right? So I was like, oh, I'll have it point it to our website so that our website doesn't fail accessibility guidelines. And so I was like, does it adhere to those guidelines? And it basically, I don't know. First of all, it goes and it figures out that we must comply with WCAG 2.1 AA, which I have no idea. And then it basically knows that there are automated checks that people will run against your site to see if it's compliant. So all you need to do is pass the tests. So that it knows this. So then this is where it's like, I know that I need to download the tool that they're going to use to see if your site passes accessibility. And it looks at this. I don't have any of this, and it installs it on my machine. So, and then it runs the tests. I don't show this here, but in order to actually get this thing running, it also realizes that it needs headless Chrome. So it has to go and install headless Chrome. And so what started out as just a question turned into this big involved thing where it's installing headless Chrome. I have 15 minutes. So like, oh, this might not return. So that's kind of why we were late, because like this thing ran. I used up all the time. And then this takes a while, but then finally it makes all the changes, runs the tool again, and it sees, it had basically all of these violations at the beginning. There's basically one violation per section, and then the chat interface had 3, the landing page had 7, and then it fixes all of them in basically 10 minutes. And then I go and I look, well, what did you change? And you can go into the style. So this is the HTML. You can see that the color scheme was changed in order to make it the contrast more accessible. And then it reduces the animation speed for accessibility. And then skip link, I don't know what that actually is doing, but it actually has done this, and then in 10 minutes. So I have like it actually completed. So this is what you end up with, and this is where, if you go to the site, I haven't touched it since the hackathon. This is what you'll see, $27 for all of it. So Mashimaro CSPDX.edu:8080. Yeah. Yeah.
By the way, WebCS.
Oh yeah. Oh, because they're moving it. I'm trying to put the news site onto web.cs. So this is the last slide. So LLMs are now your capstone team. You are the non-technical person asking, where they're interviewing you for requirements. It is your software architect. It knows implementation issues and best practices. It is now your technology expert. It knows the latest advances in the technology stack and can inform you of them, like that caching thing. It is now the domain expert. It knows things like WCAG and HTML, CSS styling. It is now your intern. It's writing, deploying, running, and debugging your code for you. So then the question is can we keep our core curriculum the same? And then how do we design for the future? Okay, so I'll stop there. I'll skip this stuff, maybe another meeting. Yeah.